So thinking about this economic turbulence, I know that you all have been watching us attentively on our news sections when we've been talking about BRICS. There's a lot of things that are coming down the road for us to be aware of. And today we have none other than Naja Muhammad here to get us in line with what we should be doing to make sure that we are securing our financial stability for the future. Naja Muhammad is a strong analytical entrepreneur and certified public accountant with more than 25 years of financial leadership experience with an extensive background in financial accounting, taxation, and business consulting, including mergers and acquisitions. Also, a very experienced in developing, restructuring, and implementing financial systems, strategic planning, financial processes development, and internal controls that significantly can improve profitability. Naja successfully acquired her first business in 2021 and currently serves as the CEO of Insane Audio, an automotive tech company. She also serves as Chief Financial Officer of a gastroenterology practice, where she oversees all financial processes, including financial reporting, procurement, budgeting, banking, treasury functions, and the management of the company's 401k benefit plan. Needless to say, she's at the right place at the right time, and so are you. Naja earned her BS in economics from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Finance and Commerce and completed various executive education programs, including attending the Tuck Executive Education at Dartmouth. She's a member of the AICPA and the Michigan Institute of Certified Public Accountants. She also actively volunteers her time in several roles, including the treasurer of the board of Vestedin, a community development financial institution, an active alumni interviewer for the University of Pennsylvania, an executive board member of Onyx Senior Honor Society Graduate Board. And when she's not working, she enjoys spiritual and metaphysical studies, trivia, cozy mysteries, watching foreign movies, walking, archery, playing tennis. So let me tell you something, not just busy. So we are so lucky to have her with us today on the spiritual injection. Now, if she could take out 1 hour of her time with all this that she has going on, I'm so glad that you are here, because this woman is, I want to say, bomb. Can we say that on here? All right, so now I want to bring up our host, Abdul Hakim Muhammad, who will take us further into the program. Again, warm welcome, and thank you for joining us on this other thought-provoking Thursday. Hashtag that.
Warm welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you, Sister Sylvina. Thank you, Sister Tara, for that wonderful introduction of our very, very special guest, Sister Naja Muhammad. As all of you know who are on the line, you know, the world has changed in the last 14 months by way of, if you're a mortgage owner, if you're a renter, and if you're just a human being living, just going to supermarkets and to the corner shops or going to the petrol stations, otherwise known in the US as the gas station, you've experienced a hike in prices. And that hike being so severe, it's caused many of us to have to rethink the way in which we live our lives. And because the various central banks have made it very clear that they don't expect these rates to come down anytime soon, definitely not 2023, and we'll be lucky if they start coming down 2024, then it's imperative that we start to look very seriously at our finances, our economics, so that we can prepare ourselves and structure ourselves adequately to survive through this period, and also to keep hold of the possessions that we have acquired. So we're at 7:10 GMT, It's not too late. Those of you who have friends and family who are in need, and I believe, and I would suggest to you that all of your friends, all of your family members are in need of hearing what we're going to be discussing this evening. So take time out to share this link that you've been given, the invitation link, so that your friends and family can go and register to be a part of this very critical conversation. And you know, on a Thursday evening at Spiritual Injection, we change lives and we connect the brightest in our community with the rest of us, okay? With the rest of us. And it's always been my passion as a young man who have learned the value of information, is to connect the brightest that we have in our community with those of us who are on our way to our brightness, okay? Because we know as a people, sometimes we don't have friends in important places and friends who we can access to get a second opinion, really a truthful opinion about all concerned. I was at the doctor's a couple of weeks ago. I had a cyst on my hand, and this cyst just came up from nowhere. And I went to the doctor's and I asked the doctor, you know, what is this? And she said, oh, it's an ingrowing hair. And I was like, wow, that's a major relief. And she advised me to take antibiotics. And I said, that's a bit heavy, you know what I mean, for one cyst. So I went to a doctor friend of mine. And the doctor friend of mine told me, you know, all we need to do is find where it is, pick it out, and it will go down within a week, as opposed to putting your body through antibiotics. And we had Dr. Aubrey on the show last week, and he concurred. It takes years to rebuild your stomach health after taking antibiotics. And I can say now, a week after speaking to Dr. Aubrey last week, and a week after speaking to a friend of mine who's also a doctor, the cyst is gone without me taking antibiotics. So the mere fact that we have friends in all walks of life, it gives us the opportunity to have a second and a third and a fourth opinion. Well, today we have a friend in finance, okay? We have a friend in that very area, because we all know how hard it is to earn money. So therefore, trying to keep it, it seems, is even harder. So it gives me tremendous pleasure to present to some of you and introduce to our great sister who is in Detroit, Michigan, or in Detroit, and she's, you know, coming all the way from Detroit to be live with us here on the Spiritual Injection tonight. Sister Naja Muhammad. Spiritual Injection, take your devices off of mute and receive our special guest, Sister Naja. Warm welcome to Spiritual Injection, Sister Naja.
Welcome, welcome. Praise God. Thank you all. And it's definitely an honor, you know, for the invitation, you know, that you thought enough of my skill sets, you know, to share with the community. So I'm very thankful to be here and grateful to share, you know, what I've been noticing, and allow this to be a communication and active dialogue to help us all, because it's with community involvement, you know, that we can actually overcome all these difficulties.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we're going to talk about our personal finances, and like Brother Hakeem, you know, stated that we're in a turbulent economy. Things have changed dramatically. You know, first we were really concerned about the lockdown and during the pandemic, and we didn't realize really what was coming afterwards. So now we're dealing with the aftermath that has, you know, created a major change and reflection in our lives. So let's get into it. So first, what we're seeing is a high level inflation. And I wanted to just talk about the definitions of inflation. So first, and Investopedia talks about inflation is a rise in prices, which is translated as a decline of your purchasing power. So the rate at which your purchasing power drops can be reflected in the average price of the basket of selected goods and services over a period of time. Then I also looked at Concise Encyclopedia of Economics, and it defines inflation as the loss of your purchasing power of a currency unit, such as the dollar, the pound, the euro, or any other unit. And we're in a global, economy now. We are connected globally. We're constantly importing, exporting, exchanging goods and services on a global level, even right from our households. And this usually is expressed as a general rise in the prices of goods and services. And pretty much many of you, on a personal level, that even just a year ago, the average price of your groceries have gone up, and a lot more significantly than, you may see they communicate on the news and so forth. So here's an example where, this basket of goods went up from 150 to 200. So there's a visual explanation of price inflation. What causes inflations? And the factors, that affect it deal with demand and supply. So you have increases in money supply, disposable income. So specifically during the pandemic, many of us saw there was an increase in disposable income. As we were not going out as much, we weren't spending as other areas, we had more income to spend. There were government policies that also contributed to that, such reduction in taxes. Then there were also incentives that were given out. I know here in the US, there were these PPP programs, which were additional monies given to businesses, small businesses during the time to kind of offset the time and some of the losses that they had during the pandemic, which gave more disposable income, allowed them to pay their staff more monies. The owners had more, and these were funds that were forgivable. So there was no tax revenue that the government would reap. There was also tax incentives that were given to households as well. So that increased, where it wasn't just your normal tax refund, you also got this additional monies, which people spent it, used it to buy more things and go onto Amazon and do, different spending than they were doing before. Also, other factors that affect our demand and supplies, just the increase in population. More people need more supplies. They need more services. That's going to create more demand. Then there's deficit financing. So government plays a part of it. So when government has too much debt and they're printing more money just to pay those debts, there increases also the money supply that is in play, which is actually reducing the value of that money when they're printing more money. Increasing in exports. So when you're increasing the exports, you also are going to be affecting the economy of both countries that are being affected. So you have a demand on the company that's doing the exporting. So now they have a push to increase the items that they're producing. And then there's the spending on the other side. And then in there, you're going to also have fluctuations in the currency values of both countries as well. But then there's other things that affect it that has nothing to do, that are kind of unexpected. Sometimes the shortage factors of productions. So we had supply chain disruptions. And primarily some of that came from this increase of demand, especially when you're talking about some of the circuits and some of the components that were necessary in producing certain goods, there was this high demand because people were spending more and buying more, but the ability to keep up with that demand, the ability to keep up with it was not feasible with the demand. And then we got to talk about this because we've just seen this throughout the world. It's not even just here in the United States. Just United States is just dealing with these fires in Maui, and then this hurricane that just hit Florida and part of the East Coast. But then you had some significant, and then also that hurricane also affected Mexico, and then you had some typhoons over in east and some significant flooding in China, part of China as well. I mean, so these natural disasters cause needs for damaged product, damaged goods, damaged businesses. So there's this immense strain on the economic, environment. So how does inflation work? And I just wanted to give a visual, because sometimes just talking about it, we all are different learners, so we need different ways to, understand the material. So you have demand and pull, and that's just pretty much when the demand for goods and services exceed production capacity, as we were talking about the supply chain shortage, or even the demand that, having excess income that people wouldn't normally have. Now they're willing to pay additional money for an item that really should be valued at, say, like these sneakers. They're really should be valued at $100, but because people have the additional income, they're willing to pay, so they drive up the prices to 150. Then you have production costs that increases prices. Just the ability to get certain components costs more because of the increased taxes to import some of those, or labor costs from those that are creating or producing some of those additional components drives up the price for those that are offering those goods. And then you have this built-in inflation, which causes prices to rise, which is wages have to rise. So when living costs are going up, labor is going to demand, wages to help them live in an environment where it's costing more for them. So those are some of the factors that, how inflation is works and increases over a period of time. And then we talked about some of the internal causes. You have a large surge in property prices, higher wages and costs, the boom in credit. So, and we'll talk about this with the interest rates, because interest rates were so low, especially during the pandemic, during 2020, 2021. So the access to credit was so easy. Man, they was giving out credit like, balloons at a child's birthday party. They, and people were using it, just using it for almost anything and everything. Access to capital for business owners was very low. You had these people stayed in the variable mortgage products because it seemed so low and they just thought it would never change. And then you also have the rise in business taxes, which is value added. So, though any additional costs are going to be added to the cost of goods. Then you have these external causes, inflation in the global commodities, what we talked about, as importing and exporting has greatly increased in this global environment. The increase in the oil and gas prices, and I talked about the exchange rate. Because we're doing so much global interaction, it's affecting the exchange rates between different currencies, between the USD and the pound, or, the yen. So you have all this fluctuations that's causing that. And then because of this global environment, we cannot think that inflation in another country is not going to affect when we're constantly trading and exchanging goods and services. So here is a graph or a picture that was shown of the inflation rates around the world. And this was as of this year, 2023. So as you see that, and some countries have had some astronomical increases. Argentina is like 114%. So in Europe, they're saying that's 6.1. But UK is at 7.9, which is a little bit higher, and Sweden is a little higher than the overall additional areas in Europe. The US, they're saying that's 4%, but I can tell you that most people will tell you it sure feels a lot higher than that. So, you know,
Yes, ma'am.
this is just a gauge that they're giving us. And I know in Africa, they're seeing much higher rates, especially as they have a lot more of the discord that's going on in their countries, and which is unfortunate. So all of those also drives the inflation rates and what they look like. And this is, like I said, this is as of 2023, but it's continuing to increase. So now let's go into how this is going to affect interest rates. So what happens is the banks, the central banks of the major markets, here we have the Fed, and then in the UK, they have their federal bank, and they push the interest rates up to try to reduce the spending, because they're thinking that if the prices, that helps to increase the credit rates, people will start to spend less and try to encourage savings, which in some sense doesn't necessarily work, because if you're spending, if your credit levels, and we're going to talk about how these interest rates are affecting, yeah, you may be spending less, but you're actually paying out more for to cover the credit that you took out during these low interest rates times. So the savings may be a little bit more challenging for those that had credit levels that they have to still address once the interest rates start going up. And the interest rates have been increasing steadily over the past 18 months globally. And in the US, they have gone up, increased 11 times. And right now, they just did an increase. And it was interesting because they were thinking that they weren't going to, all the talk was they're not going to increase it. They had to, but they did, and then, 43 of the 50 developing countries have also increased the interest rates. So everyone is feeling this pressure with the interest rates. And here are the central banks, and here's a global picture just showing you, and this was as of September 2022, and we know where we're at now in the moving into the end of the third quarter, that the raising of interest rates are still happening. There's some areas that stayed the same, but usually in those areas you already have some significant interest rate and inflation. So the interest rate is not really increases, is not going to help their economic situation. And some places they're cutting it to try to help their individual specific economic situation. But as you see, most of the world is in red.
Right.
All right, so what does this mean for us? Well, on a personal level, it just means that we have less disposable income, less income that we have to spend on all the wonderful things that we were buying during 2020, where, capital and cash was just, just so available to us. It also means, especially for the smaller businesses who feel this, is the reduced access to capital. I mean, it's harder to maybe to get additional lines of credit to help you with some working capital and so forth, because the banks, and then as soon as I think in mid 2022, it became so challenging to have a conversation with bankers about additional capital, debt capital. And then you have the equity investors just a little bit, just as much squeamish as well, just because of the pressure that they know financially a lot of businesses are under. We're finding that, of course, your necessities are costing more, and that's on a business and personal level. And then the higher rates of credit cards and lines of credit. And I have an example of, a client that I'm working with, his home equity line of credit. When we first took it out back in the end of 21, it was like 3.5%. His payment was like at $3,100. It was a large amount that he had that was being collateralized. Then now his rate is at 8.5%.
Oh my God.
His monthly payment is 3 times that. So he's now paying $8,000 a month on this same line. So now we have to have a conversation with the banker. And I was just on the phone with the banker yesterday and was like, okay, so what's the best option at this point? And they was like, well, we can put you into a fixed, and then you could come back and then and refinance when the rates start coming down. But really they didn't have any, and then that may be the best option. Is not of course it's not very palatable. But I don't think many of us thought it was going to happen so quickly, that the next thing you know, you turned around, you're like, oh my God, my payment is 3 times as much. So now you have to adjust to that. And of course that affects the housing costs, and of course the mortgage rates, and those that were in adjustable rate mortgages like this home equity line of credit, same thing, where it's based on the prime, which is going up, and now you're finding yourself, you're paying a rate 3 times as much as you were paying before. This is also affecting new buyers, which means that they have less availability to credit to purchase homes, where these same borrowers 2 years ago could purchase a home on a very small interest rate, but now the rate that they're looking at and the monthly amount that they're able to even get approved for is so much smaller, so they can afford less of a house, less space. And then that is also affecting the rental markets, of course, because now as sellers are having the inability to sell houses because the buyers are just pressured, as the ability to get the credit that they need at affordable rates. Now that's going to affect your rental market unfairly, and we already saw just a huge increase where you had people moving to places that were a little bit more convenient during the pandemic. That rose up rates, but now you're going to have this where, because people can't buy homes and they have to rent, but I think renters are going to also have to reassess that position as well, as they're going to be more renters in the market because of this. So this is a good time to reassess, with all this pressure going on. And I would say you have to reassess your budget, and your spending behavior. And it should be a family discussion. Everybody needs to pitch in. So things that were, and start off looking at the last 2 months. Where are you spending your money, have been spending money? And you also can't forget about maybe those type of expenses that come every 3 months. It might be insurance and so forth. You have to consider that as well. And start with areas that you can cut that are not necessary. I know we think everything is necessary, but when you really get down to it, is it really necessary? It's really, you have to look at what's a want and what's really a need at this time. So subscriptions, where that has become a new model for many companies, these subscriptions, you have to look at, okay, do I need Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Disney? Do I need them all, or can I do with one? What does that look like? And that's why I say it has to be a family discussion, because everyone is affected by this, because it's going to take changing of behaviors now, because we got into an environment where we were just spending money on all types of things we really didn't need, but they were fun and we had the money. And I think we also have to become more autonomous, in meaning that you start doing things on your own and not paying for the service of someone to do it for yourself. And I'll give you just a really simple example. I like almond milk, but I like, a very good quality almond milk, which costs me at least $7 a week or so forth. I found out, okay, I can make my own for fraction of that. Started making my own. So that's going to save me at least, $400 to $500 a year. That's something. And so looking at ways that you could do some things on your own, it's just about reassessing our behaviors and just being honest and having these honest conversations with ourselves. Now, with the change in credit and these prices going up, creditors are a lot more open if you come to them and say, hey, I'm having difficulty paying this. You'll know that you're having difficulty. You skip the payment, you missed the payment, because you only have so much coming in and there's a pressure for things to go out. You can only send out what you have coming in. And if there's a deficit, something has to give. But having those conversations, they are a lot more, and they understand that. They are seeing more people go missing payments. So they are a lot more kinder these days to have that conversation, to renegotiate for 12 months, some 18 months. And that may be enough time to make some adjustments, find some other ways to increase income, as well as, and then if you get some additional monies, begin to pay down some of that debt and reduce it. Pooling of resources is key. And not only within your family, but in your neighborhood. There may be opportunities to carpool, reduce your gases. There may be opportunities even for someone, a few neighbors that do a community garden, which reduce the amount you're spending on food, and just doing some volunteer and helping each other. I mean, this is a time to reassess, how do we engage, not only individually, but on a community level. That's going to be, it's really a time of collaboration. And that is really going to bring the benefits in this time that we're living in, and bring some real relief. And really, and also, what can we live without? And then for businesses, they have to reassess as well. And the pressure will be definitely more so will be felt faster with the smaller businesses. But hybrid schedules, if you can reduce your carbon footprint in, allowing some of your staff or all of your staff to work some days at home and some days in the office, that's going to reduce some of your office expenses, the electricity, so forth. And also you have, to a certain extent, a little happier group of employees. So you get better productivity, I believe. Especially as you have more women in the workplace and they have demands with children and so forth. So those are some of the things. And then also businesses have to look at the price points of their products for their consumers. Where in 2020 and 21, high, price points for certain goods was okay because people had the extra income. Now, people are going to make a second, thought about buying something that cost them $1,500, $1,600 a pop, as opposed to a comparable item that might be $600 or $700. Sure, your profit margins won't be as high, but you'll still be able to make a profit. And I think even the attitude of having these excessive profit margins needs to be reassessed as well, as business owners. So pretty much, I just thought about, Aesop's fable about the ants and the grasshopper. I mean, we have to be, and we should have been probably, having the mindset of the ant who was storing and preparing. And I think we have to prepare for things to get worse before they're going to get better, and not thinking, oh, just be carefree. It's going to turn around immediately when it's not showing that at all. So I thank you all for this brief presentation and looking forward to the dialogue.
We thank you. No need for you to thank us. We are the ones who are in need of such a presentation and such a deep dive into this whole conundrum or situation that we have found ourselves. So tell me something, Sister Naja.
Yes,
in
sir.
a word, are we actually in recession, or are they just speaking about it? Because it sounds like we're in it.
I believe we are. I think in the United States, they keep trying to avoid using that, so not to scare people. But if you talk to the average person who is living their life day to day, they're struggling, so I would say so.
Okay, so if we're in a recession, and you mentioned about these interest rates, because people are struggling tremendously to pay their mortgages and even to maintain their rents, okay? Because the mortgage owner, the person who has the debt,
Right.
with every month, these interest rates go up, is either they pay the excess, between their mortgage payment and what they receive as rent, or they have to pass that increase on to their tenants. And obviously, if somebody has a tenancy and the figure is fixed for 6 to 12 months, all of those who have 6 months tenancy agreements, that's bad luck, right? But those who have a year tenancy agreement, then they obviously they have a cushion somewhat to maintain the price, or have a fixed price for 12 months. But then if the landlord, pitched the rent at the interest rate at the beginning of the term, and those rates have gone up 12 times, okay?
Wow.
And
Yes.
now he's in negative, where the rent is not covering his mortgage. Can you see a housing bloodbath coming if this doesn't change, where people will start to hand back keys because they just can't afford to pay their mortgages for some of these investment properties, and the value of the property is obviously going down? I think we're looking at here in the UK a 10% drop within the next quarter or so. So what does the future look like to you, based upon those dynamics that I've just shared? How are you seeing the property side of things to start off with?
Brother Abdul Hakim, you are absolutely right. And the pressure from the homeowner who now has a mortgage that is now 3 times, is nowhere near covering the rent that they were receiving or are receiving, and they're in a fixed contract. They're in a contract. They can't.
Right.
But they were on it, especially for those that were in a adjustable. There is going up every month, or or as soon as, or every quarter when things are adjusting, but your rent does not, because it's in a fixed contract. Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some hard decisions that are going to have to be made on both sides. Those that are renting the property, because it's mathematics. As much as you would like to be able to help the one, your renter, but as the owner,
Right.
you only have but so many resources. You can't. So if you're paying out 10 and they only paying you 7, where's the other 3 coming from?
Right. Right.
So, and to your point about the inflated, I mean, I do think that property values got inflated, especially during the pandemic. And as people were moving and they had this additional income, they were willing to pay so much more for everything, including property. So you're looking at values that were far higher than they should have been. So now the market has to adjust. And it's very similar to what we had here in the US during 2008, 2009, where the real estate market burst, and people did have to walk away. They couldn't pay it. If you don't have it and you can't pay it, then what are you going to do? It's okay, I'll turn it in. So you bring up an excellent point, and that is inevitable. So what are the banks willing to do? Are they really going to be willing to do some adjustment? I don't know. And they may be making more money if you do foreclose, and they can get an insurance to cover it and so forth. It's the individuals that are really going to be suffering in this.
Right. So just on another note, and it's a totally different point, but it's connected. Now, what I've found is the models that many different communities use to acquire property in the first instance. And some of those models are, people pool their resources, okay, as a family, and they come together. They may buy one home, and then they pool more resources, and they buy a second home, pool more resources, and buy a third home, till all of the family members own their own property. As a people, sometimes we struggle with that, and we, have problems, and we have bills, and we have expenses that sometimes we can't afford to pay back and become overwhelmed. How is this climate, this financial climate, how can it be used to help to pull the community together and pull families together to really come out stronger than, we may be facing that which looks very fragile? But how can we use this quote unquote negative situation to actually pool our resources and strengthen our commitment to each other and come out of this stronger than we've gone into it?
Well, I think, to your point, that we're not going to have a choice. I think we have been operating because credit was so, available, and we know that credit is burden. It's not real. And now we're seeing the repercussions of that. And I think we're going to be forced to pool our resources and recognize the value in that whole concept that we've been told about for years and generations. And oftentimes in our community, we have gotten away from it because there was someone was like, oh, you can do it on your own. You don't need any help. don't have to do it together with other people, you know, you can be independent. But now we're seeing that in doing that, we've kind of put ourselves in a hole, and boxed ourselves into an environment where we are alone, you know, because now we're struggling and we need the help of others to get through this. But those are the same people that we were saying, oh, I can do this on my own. I don't need you. I don't need you. But now we're going to be forced. And I pray that we truly come out of this understanding and learning that debt is not your friend. Unless you can pay it off in 30 days and be done with it, taking out this long-term debt is not a viable, really a long-term viable option. What we should be doing, like you said, Brother Abdul Hakim, is really coming together, pool our resources, which takes patience.
Right.
Because you're not going to have that $100,000 overnight.
Right.
But when you do, and you can purchase this property or whatever this is, or this business for cash, then that reduces that burden, that debt, that weight off of you. And you can think, you know, you can really, I mean, with that debt, everything hanging over you, you can't even think, you can't even process your next step.
Right. So if we are carrying then the weight of the burden of debt that's robbing us of our creativity, then this recession then can be used to our benefit. Because
Absolutely.
are you suggesting that this recession that we're entering into, and for all intents and purposes are already in, you know, and these interest rates, you know, steadily creeping up and only going in one direction, it would seem. Are you suggesting that this climate in which we have entered, that we actually start to try on our means, like what we actually can afford, to see what it feels like, you know, what we actually can afford, and see how that feels? Because what you're actually suggesting is that we come, you know, into true reality, right?
Yes.
Because the debt allows us to live a false version of reality, right? So do you think most of us can handle reality? Because where would most of us be, Sister Naja, if all of the debt was taken away and we were left with the bare bones of our income, and we had to live in accordance with what we earn? Where would we be? Would we be in a caravan like gypsies? Like, where would we be?
I think so. I think that there is this narrative that's put out there on social media. And unfortunately, social media can be very toxic because it's presenting a false image of things and thereby affecting our mindsets. You know, we were thinking, oh, I need this 5-bedroom house to live in to be comfortable and happy. But now you got all this debt and you're not happy at all. And you could be in a 3-bedroom apartment and just as happy, have enough space to do what you need to do. I think it's going to allow us to reassess, what do we really need? You know, I think we have been walking around with way too many items that we don't even realize is weighing us down. Like, and we and in that, and by removing those things will allow us to live a better quality of life. And I think there were some signs in it during the pandemic about what quality of life looked like. You know, without the constant running around and going out and all the different things that we were doing, there was a quality of life that we were beginning to see, that we were getting glimpses of. But then quickly, those that want to give the false narrative came back and made us think like, oh no, you were missing out. You know, you really didn't have a good quality of life.
Right.
So Uh, and I don't know how long it will take for many of us to adjust, to understand that. Some of us may come willingly, and some of us, it may take a huge, moment, a tower moment to just, help us to recognize, you know, that that okay car you have is all you really need, and you okay.
Right. But that's difficult for us though, right? Because we
It
see
is.
people with we see people with a lot more money than us, like clearly a lot more money. And they seem to drive like pretty like no frills kind of motors. And many of them actually don't even have cars. They just use public transports
That's
to go where they're going. And many of them now actually ride bicycles to work and back. And I think in our mind this is a trick, right? But they're tricking us, So what is it about us that really all of what is taking place by way of interest rates rising actually affects the poorest people in the various societies than it does anybody who is wealthy and at the top? But why is it so difficult for us to learn those lessons? Because you make a great point in regards to the pandemic. Now, where the pandemic was concerned, most people turned their homes into their offices, those who worked like that. Now, if you can close your office that was, costing you rent, and you can convert a room in your home, then you're saving money and your home is bringing you an extra benefit. But if your home is not being used to help you to make money, and then on top of it, you're not getting any peace there because, you're overwhelmed with debt, then isn't that a double whammy, Sister Naja? If your house is not a source of income, nor is it a source of peace, then do we not then need a recession so that we can reassess our reality or so-called reality?
Yeah. And, I think for many of us, we're dealing with other issues as far as these items. We use these items, these material things to define who we are, thinking that that's what defines who we are. And you make a great point. Those with a lot more wealth, they don't put their monies into these expensive cars, which depreciate as soon as you drive them off. They don't have the flashiest clothes and so forth. But there's a difference in their understanding of their own self-worth. And that's where we're suffering. And we have to begin to not only work on ourselves, we've been taught that, self-improvement is the basis of community development. We have to start with self, but then we have to think about lifting up someone else, helping them see things from a different, because as long as, okay, Sister Naja gets it, but Tara doesn't get it. She's my next door neighbor. I talk to her all the time, and I don't ever have a conversation with her. I'm not helping lift her or change her mindset. Then she's going to be on social media looking at, those that have or showing the perception of having, or the TV, and using that as a basis to create this false environment or false reality for her and her family that then will affect someone else. We have to begin to, one, start sacrificing with self, and then sharing that, starting our home with our family, then our neighbors, those that we come across, so that it could begin, it could be like a virus, really. It could start catching on,
Right.
this change in mindset. But we have to be a part of the change, not just, okay, I'm making the change for myself individually.
Right.
That's not going to help the community at large. And especially where we in, because when the pressure starts happening to Sister Tara or Sister Denise or Brother Raheem, and you're not sharing ways to alleviate that pressure by making changes, their behavior is going to affect your household.
Right.
Whether we want to believe it or not, whether it
Right.
is an interaction on the road or at the supermarket, at work. So we have to begin to start making the changes on a micro and macro level.
Right. So can you see these high interest rates staying around for a while?
I do. I do. And it was interesting because I think in 2022 they thought that there wouldn't be any more that they wouldn't be a need for interest rates to go up. I do think that they're going to go up some more, and then they will stay there for a period of time, for several years. So, which means that we now have to hunker down and make those changes sooner than later, because it could only get worse. And we have to take that mindset, like the ants. Start taking that mindset as the ant and preparing now. Whatever changes you got to make now, really have that hard conversation first with self. Like, okay, I can't be going to the cafe every day and buying this coffee every single day, this cup of coffee that's cost me $5 when I can make it at home. And that bag is going to cost me $10, but it'll supply me for 3 weeks. So we have to start having these, because I do believe, Brother Hakeem, that what the pundits are saying out there, these talking heads, if anyone can go back a year ago and hear what they were saying, they were like, oh no, it's not going to happen. Here we are now, the opposite is happening. And then once again, then there's factors that are beyond our control that is going to affect the inflation. Just the natural calamities, the pressure that puts on people. So now you have this extra push to rebuild environments that wasn't even a factor before. Now it is.
So tell me, you're an accountant. That means you're pretty much a black and white person, okay? Like, there's no in between with you. So in your household, you know what comes in, and you know what goes out. Tell me, from your perspective, how much of this is a hindrance to most households where there is not a general economy, where the entirety of the household has never done a full audit of everybody's income and the collective outgoing, and what we should be spending and what we should be preserving, and how we should, really have what should be like the CFO structure of the house, and should every household have a CFO, a chief financial officer, because it seems as if everybody's earning their own separate money. The family don't seem to be pushing in the same direction, even where children are concerned, where children are earning money and some of them are not pulling their weight. Should not their income as they live in the house also be factored in? And what are some of them? I want you to add to this, how do we approach this? Because if you don't have that kind of relationship with members of your household, and your children see their money as their money, the husband sees his money as his money, the wife sees her money as her money, the dog sees his food as his food,
Yeah.
how do we get to the point where we stop hemorrhaging and actually start seeing the importance now of having a black and white monetary system in our household?
It starts with a family discussion, and you're right, it's going to take changing of how we conducted business in a household, because up to this time, Brother Abdul Hakim, we were operating all as individuals. We let everybody just do their thing with their monies. But now we're in a space where we all have to contribute something. And it's a, you start off gingerly. You can't go in there, and say, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to, no. Okay, you got to start off gingerly and,
so you
and
can't approach it like a
diplomatically.
shakedown. It can't be a shakedown.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't know you were hiding 50 grand.
But I think we also have to pull on
before you go, Sister
understand.
Naja, before you get
Yes.
any further, like, can you just imagine people holding back on private accounts?
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness, absolutely. It is interesting because with one of my daughters, I'm on her account, so I can see her spending. So
Right.
so I don't, go to her directly and like, yeah, I saw you spend this amount to buy this clothing, but what about groceries? Are you gonna do some grocery shopping, this time? But I also think though, when we see positive changes in the family, we have to recognize it.
Right.
Oftentimes we don't recognize positive changes, thinking that, oh, we tell them that they're doing good, is going to go to their head, da da da. No, yes, tell them, because the more encouragement will begin to start affecting their behavior. So,
Right.
where it's my youngest daughter, who, the baby of the family, who, with babies of the family, they think everything is theirs. They can do whatever they want. There's no accountability. And that's our fault as parents. I'm not going to even, I'll be honest. I created that. But as I talked to her about, and there was some resistance. Why I got to do that? That's not mine. Da, da, da. But then she started making those changes. So when she does the grocery shopping, I'm absolutely applauding her. Like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I am appreciative, and I'm thankful to God that she is making that change, because that's a beautiful thing, because that's helping her evolve, for when she has her own household, and things that she could share with her friends as well. So it's going to be, we have to be patient, because it's going to take some time for the change to come about, and since we've all been really kind of living independently together.
Right.
But now we got to live cooperatively together. And what we will start to find, that we are going to gain more success that way, which some other groups have shown us, that we have seen. And like I said, and we need to share those successes with other families as well, to help them through that too.
Right. I was in a shop recently, and it was owned by an Indian group of family and extended family. There's about 7 men, and they were gold traders. They buy and sell gold. And they just have this amazing operation. One negotiates, the other one weighs the product, the other one seals the product, and the other one secures the shop. Like, it's a whole operation. And I mean, I stopped and I said to them, the reason why I keep on coming back to your shop, it's not because you're the cheapest. It's because I'm admiring you as men coming together and working cooperatively as a community. Like, I'm in awe watching the trust between yourselves, because the same people in here every day, and they just have a system. There's only one person who handles the money. There's only one person who weighs the item. There's only one person who does negotiate. And it's just awesome to see, unity in operation. So I say all of that to say, because I've got to come back to the bigger point, because the painful part might be, having to pay more for things that you don't really need. Okay. But if this will help us to become a stronger community, focusing on collective survival, then the pain will lead to abundant pleasure, would it not? Because look how much money we spend on the high street purchasing food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as if when we were younger, we never ate out on the road or ate from takeaways as much as we do now. You could easily spend, $500, $1,000 on restaurants and takeaways, Uber Eats, and a pizza here, a pizza there. Like, all of that stuff adds up, doesn't it? And if every day your door is ringing and there's an Amazon man outside delivering some kind of parcel, like, we need a CFO in every home. I got to get back to this point. Now, somebody needs to tell us what our budget is, because it seems like we spend without having a budget. And it seems as if these central bankers are actually forcing a budget on us. But should it take them to increase, interest rates for us to curtail our spending, or shouldn't our own good sense tell us to curtail this out of control spending in order for us to focus on things that are far more important and much more advantageous to the community?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But I do think that we seek pleasure. I mean, as human beings, we're looking for pleasure, and we have been shown through media and so forth, pleasure can be bought this way or that way. And they are doing what they need to do to protect themselves. So let's be clear on that. So it's not about they're doing it for the interest of our own good.
Sure.
And I they are making money by increasing rates for themselves. But I think it is a good not reflection, but it's a good message to us where we have gone wrong.
Right.
To take that look in the mirror and say, okay, I drank the Kool-Aid, and to a certain extent, this is my fault. It's just same way when you were talking about the takeout. There's an effect that is going to happen when you're constantly eating takeout. You're constantly you're going to have your diabetes, you're overweight, your healthcare expenses skyrockets. Now, your state of mind is not good. When you could have made a change and said, okay, instead of paying $20 tonight for a meal out, I can take the time, spend an hour. And sometimes then you got some great people online that'll show you how to do it in 30 minutes, which I love. But to have a meal that's going to cost you, really the net cost, it might be $3. And yes, every home needs to recognize, just like you stated about that family, where each one of them was placed where their talent is. Right. We have to operate our families as such. So it may not necessarily be if you have a traditional household where you have a husband and wife, where the husband controls all the finances. He may not be good with finances.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
So then maybe the wife is the one that needs to. And then he recognizes that, and we recognize what everybody's value is so that we can operate more efficiently, cooperatively. What happens, I think, oftentimes we put each other in positions that don't fit with our true skill sets.
Right.
And that affects the level of efficiency. Because if you had, in the case of that family, an Indian family, where if you had the person that was weighing, but he really should have been cutting, and now he's weighing, it's going to throw off their level of efficiency. So we have to really look at our skill sets, and even in the children that we have at home, adult children, so forth. each of them have certain skill sets that we need to bring, and it can't be the parents thinking that they have all the answers, because they don't, because we don't.
Right.
No one human being, because that will make us God, and we don't have it. But
Right.
our adult child might have, a way to do things that are much more efficient, and they have a skill set that they should shine and use in the household to make it more efficient. And
Right.
we got to let our egos, and that's this time that we're coming in, because of the pressure, egos are going to have to leave the house, exit stage left.
Right.
If
So
the
sorry.
no, I hope that answered. I know I was rambling a bit.
No, that's fine. One last question from me, then I'm going to ask Sister Tara and Sister Sylvina if they have any questions to pose them at this time. But what's your thoughts? And we're going to discuss this on, forthcoming discussions that we're going to have in the next few weeks. But I just want you to touch real quickly on what your thoughts are regarding these global interest rate hikes and the hawkish nature of these central banks. Is it preparing for a new financial global system, or is it just hawkishness to quote unquote bring inflation under control, or is it preparation for something far bigger than what's being discussed at the moment?
Wow, that's a weighty question. But I do think that whether they understand it or not, because sometimes, you have these economists and bankers thinking that they understand a certain thing, but there are factors that are being bought in that are beyond them as well. I do think we are getting to a point where the environment in which and how we spend money is going to change.
Right.
Whether we are willing to accept it or not. I mean, just think about it. 10 years ago, we were carrying a lot more cash for everything.
Right. Right.
In a period of 2 years during the pandemic, people who did not accept credit cards all of a sudden started accepting credit cards.
Right.
Now this has become a new way that currency is now interact, which allows us also to interact globally much easier than we did before.
Right.
So before we were restricted where you could only do business within a certain geographic region. Now, because things are changing on a financial standpoint, we can do it, we have more options now. So I do think that this will force us into another realm, some with intention of those that are driving these interest rates, and some that is going to be, some of this is also beyond our understanding, really within God's control. I think this financial system has to change. It can't operate like this. Credit can't be, the go-to like it has been more. There has to be a change in it. But I mean, that's really a weighty question, because it's going to be very interesting to see. And then now even though the cryptocurrency has had its difficulty, that it may be a new way that was a sign to come. I think it happened way too fast. People didn't really understand. You had, those that did not have good intentions and, played around with it too quickly. But I think that also was a sign a change is coming. And I think there were people who were very uncomfortable with, who were traditional bankers and so forth, because they didn't understand it. They may have been part of the undermining of it. We don't know. There's a lot more to be seen.
Right. Fantastic. Sister Tara, Sister Sylvina?
What jumped out for me, sister, thank you for what you shared. was as I'm listening, it seems as though we were speaking about intentional spending, just intentional, intelligent, really personal financing. And, in terms of how the conversations moved on, in terms of, there being a shift, it makes me think, well, whether we have this disposable income or not, the type of spending, the type of organization, Abdul Hakim mentioned, a black and white monetary system in the home, that is good for any environment. It's just, for any climate, it really just depends on what we intend. Do we have something to spend the money on? Because obviously we don't. That's why we're, that's why we're titillating ourselves, I guess, with things that are not going to bring any return. So that's really my takeaway for today. It's not, for me, yes, the climate is as it is. And, yes, it would be smart to take it seriously, but actually it's also a training and preparation period for, those who want to do greater things and actually make the best out of the finances that they have, regardless of the of the environment, the environment that the financial climate that we're living in. So it was more of a comment than a question.
Oh,
but
thank you, Sister Savini.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Well, actually, I have a couple questions, but I'm going to ask this one. So, for starting with the comment, in America, in the US, credit is something that is like, you have to have credit. You have to have credit because they check your credit for a job. They check your credit if you're getting car insurance. They check your credit for everything. So it's basically like they force you to have credit in order to live. So that means you have to have good credit, a good credit score to do anything, to rent an apartment, a house, or anything like that. So how can you avoid the whole credit trap? For me, I feel like it's a credit trap because you can't do anything without credit in the US. So that's my first question.
Well, I think going back to something earlier that I learned and I said is, even if we use credit, you can use credit in a way where it is still it's still allowing you to stay within your means, but it takes discipline. At one time, American Express, you had to pay it off in 30 days. So that meant you had to be disciplined with that card. Now, what American Express did, started allowing people to pay over time. Which, to your point, Sister Tara, it got us into that trap of, oh, okay, I can spend a little bit more because I have more time to pay it off. So you can still build your credit profile with a disciplined credit approach, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And you have to be able to look at, okay, what can I really spend? Even if you spend, say, $15 on your card, pay it off, it's going to report the same way if you spent $1,000 and paid off $1,000.
Okay.
So you don't have to spend, you have a credit limit of $10,000, spend the whole $10,000. Well, you don't want to do that anyway, because that's going to mess up your credit. You go to the top of your credit limit, but you can spend a very minimal amount just to keep that in motion. But I think, to Brother Hakim's point, some of that's going to have to change as well, as people are going to start taking hits on their credit. But they are credit worthy, meaning, or they do pay their bills on time. They do, so there is going to, I think that whole credit analysis is going to change. So I think that's going to be part of what's going to change in this whole financial scheme, because it doesn't work when you have allowed people to be very undisciplined. And now you're trying to call them into account. Well, it takes a lot of work. And, for us that have children, if you allowed your children to be undisciplined in certain areas, and then you try to call it takes time to make that change. So I do think that there's going to be a change in that whole concept about this credit score.
Okay, thank you. My next question, thinking about the time that we're moving or the time that we're in now, how much should we be saving each month of our, I won't say disposable income, the money that we're spending on Uber Eats? How much of that should we be saving per month? And then should we, well, I think so, but should we be keeping cash on hand? Should we always have cash? How much should we be saving, and should we always have cash? And I'm not saying like don't save your money in the bank, but you should
Right.
have.
No, I do think you should definitely always have cash, because you never know, you be in an environment where, one, the system is shut down, because remember, the credit card system operates off of networks.
Yeah.
What happens if the network goes down? You know, and dealing with talking about these disasters and calamities, it can affect the whole system. And I'll tell you a very interesting, when we were in DC for an event, it was the Million Man March commemorative 15th anniversary. The whole system was shut down. You could not use a credit card. So how are you going to exchange goods and services? You need cash. So yes, absolutely, you should have cash on hand. And then about the amount you should be saving, honestly, as much as you can. I'm not going to sit there and say 30%, 40%, as much as you can, because right now 30% may not even be realistic, because you're so, burdened with all these additional payments and debt that has gone up in credit, but your income hasn't gone up. So as much as you can, even if if it was $10 you did this month and you have an extra $10 that you save next month, save something. But the previous history has been 30%, save 30%, 25%. But with the pressure that people have going on, they may not even have the ability to save 5%. So, but save something, do your best to save something, and definitely have some cash on hand. I always tell my children that, and I don't know how many times we'll come in a situation and they'd be like, "Oh," I said, "Y'all got cash?" And they were like, "No," because they think they can always use Apple Pay or pull out their card and use that. I'm like, and then we'll go into a restaurant that might charge you cheaper. We've been places where they'll give you a surcharge just by using your credit card, because you're using a credit card. So you're spending more money when you could have used cash and saved some money.
Right. I would like to chime in on a question, because one of the things, Sister Tara, where you are in the world, you're in the UAE. And one of the things that they try to do when they're selling homes is structure your payment plan to pay off the capital without including interest. Okay. So they may sell you a home in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi for 200,000, and they will structure a plan, 50,000 up front and 150,000 over 10 years. Okay. No interest. So again, and it's a shorter period of time, and they expect you to pay interest free, where the model of the West is you can buy a home and pay off just the interest over 25,000 years. You have interest only loans that doesn't touch 1 cent of the principal, which is fine if you know how to maneuver and acquire that property and build up equity, and obviously release that equity before that debt is due. It can work to your favor. However, Sister Naja, this last question. Should we be moving more towards trying to align with such banks as those that do not charge interest for loans, as opposed to this Western model that really just fleeces the person and uses us as tools to make bankers extremely rich from usury or from interest payments that we pay for really a lifetime worth of debt. How can we make this maneuver? And is this a model that we can adapt and should look closer into?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree. And there are some banks that are doing business. I know here in the United States, there is I think Guidance Residential that has that same similar model. But to that point too, it'll force you to spend on what you're really able to afford, then
Right.
an amount that really can't, if push comes to shove, which is where we're at right now.
Right.
And you're going to have to sacrifice for that down payment, working together in that cooperative manner with that family. So that is the long-term success for the financial model and a stable economy. What we have going on here, this, the free fall with the credit and so forth, you see where it has gotten. People are not making really long-term headway in their net worth and so forth, because they end up running into a wall when we have situations like this inflationary and high interest rate environment.
Right. So it's been a delight, Sister Naja,
Oh,
and
thank
we're
you.
at our time. Sister Tara's begging me for another question. Well, you don't have to beg, Sister Tara. I'll go ahead.
We have a couple of questions in the chat. I think one you kind of answered before. The first question was in the mainstream news, they're saying that inflation and the cost of living should be reduced by April 2024. Do you think it will? I think you already kind of answered that. That's the first question. Someone else asked, what assets should be pursued during a recession? And then someone, let's see, I think that's it. Oh, where can I get a list of these banks? Those bank models are here in the United Arab Emirates.
Oh,
In the UAE.
well, please share.
I'll share it. And then it said, is it safe to save at home or in the bank?
I think both. I think it needs to be a combination of both, but I think we need to stay vigilant where our money is, and even who we decide to bank with, because some of these bigger bankers, bigger banks are not the best. I mean, I do love credit unions. I'm a big proponent of credit unions. I think they honor what you put in far better. I think they are a little bit more trustworthy. But of course, you have to look in this environment, those credit unions that have been around a long time and have a strong balance sheet that can be around. So you got to be vigilant about where you put, but it should be both. I mean, you should have some cash on hand, but you should also have a banking relationship as well where your money is too. And then as far as assets, of course, I've always been a proponent of precious metals, your silver, your gold. Of course, the amounts have gone up significantly, but there are different programs where you can save small amounts in silver or gold too. So, instead of $100 just going into your savings account, you can redirect it to purchase some small amounts of silver and gold as well.
And I would advise everybody who's listening on this particular podcast this evening, as our beautiful sister just advised in regards to precious metals, we did have a couple of shows discussing the importance of precious metals. But as we saw the news earlier this week, late last week, in regards to this new formation, Sister Naja, of the BRICS nations coming together and them announcing in South Africa that they were expanding, their membership to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Argentina, Ethiopia, and Iran and others. The day after that announcement was made, the price of gold spiked. not significantly, but it did go up. It moved from 1490, I think, sterling, 1480, 1490 sterling, and I think it's at 1530 at the moment. So it's steadily increasing back up beyond £1,500 up to 1,600. And the next announcement that people are expecting in January, when this new wave of membership comes in, because nobody expected Saudi Arabia to join BRICS. Nobody expected the UAE to join BRICS. And when you look pound for pound economically now, these are growing economies as opposed to European dying economies.
Right.
You see? And these are more African nations getting involved in this new alliance that have all of the minerals. And you see all of these coups taking place in Africa, in minerally rich nations that are aligning themselves more so with the BRICS governments. So all of that to say, it's obviously another conversation for another time, but it seems as if we're definitely moving towards a new economic system. And if, you know, we're not prudent and do not keep our eyes and our ears to the ground and watch and read diversely, then it may seem, you know, that our economics may die with the economic model of the West. So we thank you for blessing us with this wonderful global perspective that you have given us this evening in such a short space of time. We applaud you. We really appreciate you. So as closing remarks, Sister Naja, what would you like to leave this beautiful audience with?
Well, one, I would like to say that it has been truly a pleasure, and I'm really grateful that you even invited me to be a part of this conversation. But I think the biggest takeaway is about cooperative economics and collaboration on a, household level, but also to your point that you just ended on a global level. We have to stop thinking very individual, and we have to begin to work collaboratively and cooperatively if we're going to have long-term success, and start preparing. Keep our eyes and ears open, talking to each other, sharing information with each other, so we're not caught off guard, like the grasshopper. You got to be like the ant and work and sacrifice. And it's going to take some sacrifice. So even if it turns in 2024, it doesn't matter. If you didn't sacrifice, what good is it going to do for you?
Right. Fantastic. We love you. We appreciate you. And we are
honored to have
you on our platform. It's been a true delight to have you here this Thursday evening. So those of you in the listening audience who appreciated what you heard this evening, please take your devices off mute and give our special guest a well-deserved massive round of applause. Thank you, Sister Naja.
Thank you, sister. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Minister. Absolutely beautiful. Beautiful.